So let's dive into a modern paradox, one that's playing out right now in Tunisia. For decades, this country bet its entire future on education. They invested heavily, to create a super-skilled population. But that very investment, that big bet, has sparked a crisis that now threatens the nation's whole foundation.
It's a tough question, isn't it? But you kind of have to ask it to understand Tunisia today. The nation made a promise to its people, and that promise was education. And here's the thing. They managed to fulfill that promise, but they also broke it, all at the exact same time.
And here is that contradiction in just stark numbers. The promise? Well, Tunisia spends a staggering 7% of its GDP on public education. To put that in perspective, that's nearly double the global average. Now the reality? 95% of its IT engineers, the very people meant to build its future, have left the country. So how on earth did this happen?
Okay, part one. Let's look at how this was a nation truly built on education. This commitment wasn't just some fad, it spanned a century. It actually started back under the French protectorate, and then it just exploded after independence in 1956. The new government made education the absolute cornerstone of the nation, setting this incredibly ambitious goal for universal enrollment. And you know what? Against all odds, they did it. They reached a 99% primary enrollment rate by 2014, which is just a monumental achievement.
Let's just pause on this number for a second. 7%. 7% of an entire country's gross domestic product poured into public education. This wasn't just some line item in a budget, it was a national creed. It was a belief that human capital, the minds of its people, was Tunisia's greatest natural resource.
And that was the promise, right? The deal made with generations of Tunisians: get an education and you will build a better future, not just for yourself, but for your country. The nation invested in its people, fully expecting that investment to pay off with prosperity and stability. But then, something went terribly, terribly wrong.
Which brings us to part two, the Great Disconnect.
In most countries, a university degree is your best defense against unemployment. But in Tunisia, it's become a liability. The unemployment rate for graduates is nearly double the national average, and for female graduates, it's just catastrophic, 40.6%. Let that sink in. The country's most educated citizens are the ones most likely to be jobless.
So what's causing this disconnect? Well, according to experts inside the system, like Kader Ghazi from the Ministry of Higher Education, the system itself just failed to adapt. It kept producing graduates with skills the job market didn't need anymore, creating a whole generation of overqualified and underemployed people.
And any attempt to fix this has been pretty much paralyzed by political instability. Ever since the 2011 revolution, the constant turnover of ministers has meant that any long-term, essential reforms to, align education with the economy have been stalled again and again. The system was just stuck, and the frustration, it began to boil over.
Part 3. When teachers say no.
Now, to understand this next part, you really need to know about the UGTT. This is not just any labor union. It is one of the most powerful institutions in Tunisia, a political force so significant that it was a co-winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for helping guide the country's democratic transition. So yeah, when the UGTT speaks, the nation listens.
So in 2023, the teachers' unions launched what they called a silent strike. And honestly, it was a brilliant and disruptive tactic. They kept teaching, so you couldn't accuse them of abandoning students, but they withheld the final grades, effectively holding the entire academic year hostage. Their demands were simple: better pay and job security, which really just reflected their own economic desperation.
This quote from a teacher really captures the deep conflict and loyalty at play here. A lot of teachers felt torn, but their allegiance to the union, which they saw as the last defender of their rights, was absolute. It really shows a system where faith in institutions was just collapsing, leaving only solidarity in its place. But as this frustration grew internally, many of the most skilled decided the only way out was, out of the country.
Part 4, the Great Escape.
In just the last few years, 40,000 engineers have packed their bags and left Tunisia. Just let that number sink in. These aren't just workers. These are the architects, the innovators, the people who build a modern economy, and they are gone. The damage is most stunning when you look at one critical sector: information technology. An absolutely staggering 95% of Tunisia's IT engineers have left. The industry has been completely hollowed out. The digital future that Tunisia invested in is now being built somewhere else by Tunisians. And the reason why is brutally simple. It's the money. An engineer can earn up to 10 times more in Europe. Even in neighboring countries like Morocco and Jordan, the pay is 2.5 times higher. The economic incentive to leave isn't just a pull factor, it's an irresistible force. The president of the Order of Tunisian Engineers, Mohsen Grisi, asked the really terrifying question at the heart of this brain drain. If all the builders leave, who is left to build the country? It's an existential crisis. But for those without a specialized degree, the escape route is far, far more dangerous.
And that brings us to our final part, burning the way out.
The word itself, harga, is incredibly powerful. It literally means to burn. It refers to this practice of burning your passport, of erasing your identity so that if you're caught, you can't be sent back. It is a deeply symbolic act of burning your entire past in a desperate hope of maybe finding a future.
This phenomenon became such a huge part of the national conversation that it was turned into a hit primetime TV series also called Harga. The show was this form of entertainment education, using a dramatic story to warn young people about the brutal realities of the journey and the life that actually awaits them.
The show's core message was a direct warning, trying to dismantle that glamorous illusion of Europe that so many people held. It was a desperate attempt to show that the dream is very often a nightmare.
And this brings us all the way back to our central question. Tunisia made a promise to its people through education, but a promise of skills without a promise of opportunity, well, that just becomes a source of frustration, of protest, and ultimately, of flight. The Tunisian paradox serves as this stark warning: investing in people is only half